My adulterous wife is now pleading for forgiveness after abandoning me while I was in the hospital. I'm Jason, a 47-year-old man, and I would like to share my life story here in order to receive some guidance. It all began 12 years ago when I was married to Susan, my first wife. We were blessed with 2 children, Laura and Lucas, who were 3 and 5 years old at the time. Life in our small Midwestern town was routine, with weekly game nights around our worn dining table, the comfort of knowing our parents, and the regular rhythms of family dinners. We learned the principles of hard effort, humility, and the conviction that character matters more than material belongings from Tom, a committed high school English teacher, and Linda, a kind nurse at the nearby hospital. I can still clearly recall those early years since our humble, albeit never opulent, house was filled with love, laughter, and the basic joys of communal life. However, all changed on one fatal day, which still stings me bitterly. I was driving to my office in Phoenix on a clear autumn morning, thinking it would be just another typical business trip. The meeting had gone well, and I was finishing up some paperwork in a quiet conference room when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was Susan checking in as usual, nothing unusual. I went out into the hallway and said, "Hey, what's up?" But then her voice hit me cold, almost smug. There was no preamble, no pleasantries, just Jason, I'm divorcing you and I've already sold our house. Jordan and I are moving in together. Good luck finding a new place. She ended it with a laugh, as if it were the punchline to some mean joke. For a split second, it felt like I was listening to someone recount my life as if I weren't even present. The words were quick, sharp, and more startling than the last. But I knew immediately that I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me. Although her silence on the other end was brief, I could tell she had expected outrage, possibly even pleading for me, so I offered only indifference, even though my mind was racing with a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. Crack, I forced my voice to remain calm and my tone as neutral as I could manage, responding as if she had just mentioned switching coffee brands. My wife had not only chosen to leave me during one of the darkest periods of my life, when I was hospitalized following an unexpected health scare, but she had the gall to plan everything so casually that I sat in the hallway, my hand tightening around my phone, replaying her words over and over again, trying to understand how she could be so heartless. 6 years of marriage, all those years of trust, and shared dreams had all been shattered by a single phone call. I recalled the day I ended up in the hospital due to an unexpected collapse, a diagnosis that rocked me to my core, and my vulnerability and weakness. I was dependent on the love and support of the one person I thought would always be by my side, but Susan decided to leave me to recover alone, my pride in shambles, and my future uncertain. That painful memory fueled the fire inside me, and when I returned to the conference room, my mind was only focused on the house I had once shared with her. The house we had worked so hard to build, brick by brick, memory by memory. I recalled every late-night discussion about saving for a down payment, every late-night discussion about our future in that modest home, and all of a sudden it felt like a cruel joke. I sat back down and stared blankly at the documents in front of me, my thoughts racing, until the initial shock was replaced by a quiet determination. The divorce call was the announcement that she had already sold the house. It wasn't just the end, it was a declaration that our shared dreams were worthless to her. I knew I had taken action long before this day, when we refinanced our mortgage, and I had discreetly made sure the deed was only in my name. It was a practical decision at the time, but now it was my saving grace, my secret trump card. In the face of her betrayal, that phone call and Susan's icy declaration was the last straw I had to act not only for myself, but also for the integrity of everything we had built together. I left the conference room with a heavy heart, but a clear head, prepared to regain control of my life. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had already put things in motion. And I would file for divorce. I'd secure every legal document, and I'd make sure that her reckless decision left her with nothing. I remembered the promises we'd made, the sacrifices we both endured, and now as I sat in that quiet hallway, I vowed that I would not let her actions define me. I would use her betrayal as a catalyst to rebuild, to find a future where I wasn't constantly second-guessed or dismissed. In that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. Even though the pain was overwhelming, there was a strange sense of relief too, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, I was free from the shackles of a broken marriage, free from the lie that our love was unbreakable. And as I drove home that day, my thoughts were no longer of despair, but of a cold, calculated resolve to reclaim every piece of my life that she had tried to steal away. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also sparked in me a fire of determination, a determination to rebuild not just my home, but my entire future on my own terms. In the months and years that followed that fateful phone call, my world shifted from one of shattered trust and bitter betrayal to a long, winding road of healing and self-reclamation. At first, I couldn't imagine how I would ever rebuild everything I had worked for, the savings, the memories, and the dreams we built together after Susan left me. I recall the loneliness, the endless nights spent staring at the empty walls of our home, and the icy realization that I was left to pick up the broken pieces of a life I once thought was unassailable when I was in the hospital. However, as time went on, the intense suffering started to change into a resolute determination that allowed me to take charge of my own fate. I left the house we shared because I needed space to rediscover who I was without the burden of betrayal pressing on my chest every day. I threw myself into my work, directing my anger and heartbreak into long hours at the company, and then into rebuilding my life according to my own terms. I remember spending many evenings in a tiny motel room reading old letters and financial records, reliving the moment I realized that the deed to our house was only in my name. This was a silent decision I had made during our refinance that ended up being my unexpected salvation. Even though it was painful, that realization gave me hope. I realized that, although Susan had believed she was leaving with everything, she had actually given me the upper hand without even realizing it. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece, moving into a modest apartment where I could finally start over, putting all of my energy into my passions, writing, hiking, and even trying my hand at cooking, things I had never had time for before. I found comfort in the little things in life, like having coffee in the morning on a quiet porch, taking long walks down tree-lined streets in our small Midwestern town, and occasionally receiving visits from close friends who reminded me that I was more than the sum of my heartbreak. Every day I felt a little lighter, as if the burden of the past was slowly easing. The bitterness of those early days started to give way to a quiet strength, and I began to realize that even though the pain would never completely go away, it could be turned into something positive, a catalyst for growth and self-discovery. As I began volunteering at the local community center teaching seniors basic computer skills, this not only kept me occupied, but it also reconnected me to a community that cared for one another in ways I had nearly forgotten. The memories of Susan's icy voice on that pivotal phone call would occasionally interrupt my newly discovered tranquility, leaving me wondering how someone who had once been the center of my world could disappear so abruptly, leaving nothing but a trail of broken promises and stolen dreams. Then, as if the past had not yet finished its cruel game, one crisp autumn morning 12 years later, a brief, almost apologetic text appeared on my phone. "Jason, I'm sorry. I need to talk. Please, can we meet?" My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I was thrown back to that terrible day, reliving the shock and the overwhelming sense of loss. I spent a long time staring at the screen, struggling with a range of emotions. Part of me wanted to ignore it entirely in order to preserve the wall I had built to keep myself safe from more suffering, but another part of me, the part that had learned so much about forgiveness and the importance of closure, wondered if perhaps this was an opportunity to finally put the past to rest once and for all. After many nights of reflection, I made the decision to meet her at the old cafe near the town square, a place that brought back to simpler times when I believed in second chances and the possibility of redemption. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table where I could watch the door and get ready for whatever was about to happen. The cafe was comfortable and familiar, with soft background music and the scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the subtle aroma of homemade pastries. I sat there thinking until Susan finally came out. Time had softened her once proud eyes and left lines on her face, but there was also a noticeable sense of regret and vulnerability in the way she carried herself. Wearing a light jacket and a modest blouse, she looked both different and painfully alike, a reflection of the woman I knew, now tempered by years of suffering and regret. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit across from me, and she said softly, her voice trembling as if she was afraid of the weight of her own words. For a long, heavy moment, we just stared at each other, silent, but filled with the echo of our shared past. Finally, she said, "I've spent every day since I left trying to understand what I did, trying to figure out how I could have hurt you so deeply. I'm sorry for everything, for taking everything for granted. I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that I regret it." Every day her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and in that instant, I saw the vulnerability that had driven her away all those years ago. I listened to my own heart, a battleground of memories and newfound strength. I didn't rush to forgive her, and I didn't let anger cloud my judgment. Instead, I took a deep breath and asked Susan the questions that had been bothering me for so long. She hesitated, then explained that in the years after our divorce, she had pursued a life full of ephemeral thrills, a life that left her feeling more and more alone every day. She acknowledged that she had lost sight of what truly mattered, love, commitment, and the deep connection we once shared. She said that the regrets were overwhelming, and that every day was a reminder of the family, the home, and the dreams we lost because of her choices. As I gazed at her, my thoughts were racing with the hurt of the past, as well as the cautious optimism that one day I would be able to let go. "I cannot guarantee that I will bring you back." I spoke slowly, "but I can say that I've changed as a person over the years. I've pieced my life back together, and I won't allow that foundation to fall apart once again." Her eyes looked into me, quietly begging for another opportunity to do things right. In that moment I realized that while forgiveness might be possible, it would come on my terms. I needed to heal fully and ensure that I would never again be betrayed by someone I once trusted with everything. As we left the cafe, the cool Midwestern air felt both refreshing and heavy with unspoken promises. I knew that this conversation was only the beginning of a long process, one that might lead to closure or perhaps even an unlikely reconciliation. But as I drove home, the landscape unfolding in familiar shades of autumn, I felt a tentative glimmer of hope. Maybe after all these years, there was a way to mend the broken pieces of our past, not for the sake of rekindling what we once had, but to finally bring peace to the wounds that had defined my life for far too long. And so, with cautious optimism and the steady resolve of a man who had learned the true value of self-worth, I prepared myself for the next chapter, one where forgiveness might be possible, but only if it was earned and never forced.